I know this might sound like a bold statement, but I believe every world leader should practice yoga. Not because I want every president, prime minister, king, queen, diplomat to become a yoga teacher. No, 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 no. And not because I think yoga magically solves every problem in the world, but because the quality of our decisions is directly connected to the state of our nervous systems. And what you're thinking about when you're leading millions or billions of people, what you're feeling, that matters a whole lot. So in this video, I invite you to explore something that most people never think about. What if some of the biggest problems in the world are being decided by people whose nervous systems are completely overloaded? Think about leadership for a moment. A world leader doesn't just make decisions for themselves. They make decisions that affect economies, healthcare systems, education, international relationships, military action, entire populations. Every decision creates a ripple effect. And yet, those decisions are often being made under extraordinary levels of stress. Imagine carrying the responsibility of an entire nation. Imagine waking up every day to briefings about crises, disasters, threats, conflicts, and uncertainty. That's a tremendous amount of pressure for any human being, because at the end of the day, leaders are still human beings, and human beings have nervous systems. Now let's talk about what stress does to the brain. Research shows that chronic stress increases activity in the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain responsible for threat detection and survival responses. Its job is to identify danger. And that's incredibly useful when danger is present, when a saber-toothed tiger is coming, when you have to move out of the way of a moving vehicle. The problem is that under prolonged stress, the brain can become hyper-focused on threats. Everything starts looking like a problem. Everything starts looking like an attack. Everything starts feeling urgent. At the same time, chronic stress can weaken the prefrontal cortex. That's the area responsible for long-term thinking, strategic planning, emotional regulation, empathy, complex decision-making. In other words, stress strengthens the part of the brain that reacts and weakens the part that reflects. Think about that. Because when someone is leading a nation, reflection is essential. Perspective is essential. The ability to think beyond today's crisis is essential. That's why I often ask, what would happen if world leaders spent even 10 minutes a day intentionally regulating their nervous systems? What would happen if they learn how to pause before reacting? What would happen if they developed greater emotional awareness, greater patience, greater clarity? Would every disagreement disappear? Of course not. But the quality of the conversation might improve. And that's sometimes where the transformation begins. One of the most powerful aspects of yoga is that it teaches people how to create space between stimulus and response. Most conflict happens in that tiny gap. Something happens, someone reacts, a decision is made, a consequence follows. But yoga trains us to slow down, to breathe, to observe, to respond intentionally rather than react automatically. That may sound simple, but it's one of the most important leadership skills on the planet. Controlled breathing practices known as pranayama have been shown to lower stress, reduce blood pressure, and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the system in our bodies responsible for rest, recovery, regulation, digestion. It's the opposite of fight or flight. When the nervous system becomes regulated, people gain access to greater creativity, clearer thinking, and improved decision making. That's not spiritual theory. That's neuroscience. And this isn't just about politicians, it's about all leadership. Corporate leaders, university leaders, community leaders, parents, teachers, pastors, coaches, because leadership always begins with self-leadership. If you cannot regulate yourself, it becomes difficult to effectively lead others. One of the things yoga has taught me is that peace isn't passive. Peace requires skill. Peace requires discipline. Peace requires emotional regulation. And perhaps most importantly, peace requires awareness. The awareness to recognize when you're reacting from fear, to recognize when stress is influencing your judgment, and the awareness to choose a different response. Now imagine scaling that. Imagine leaders around the world are making decisions from clarity instead of panic, from vision instead of survival, from wisdom instead of reactivity. Will the world instantly become perfect? No. However, I believe it would become healthier, become more compassionate, more collaborative, and perhaps more peaceful, even if it's a little bit. This is why my mission is world peace through inner peace. Because I don't believe peace begins in government buildings. I believe peace begins inside human beings. Peace begins when individuals learn how to regulate their nervous system. Peace begins when people learn how to breathe before they react. Peace begins when people learn how to remain grounded during uncertainty. And those skills matter whether you're leading a nation or leading your own family. So I think every world leader should practice yoga. Absolutely. Not because yoga is about touching your toes. Not because yoga is about being flexible. Not because yoga is about being fit. But because yoga helps people access the best versions of themselves. And the world desperately needs leaders operating from their best selves, not their most stressed selves. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who believes leadership starts from within. And if you're a yoga teacher, aspiring yoga teacher, who desires to create greater impact and be the positive change you'd like to see in the world, I invite you to join me in this mission. So one of the ways to join is just by subscribing. Absolutely join in on that. Together, we're building a movement rooted in one simple belief: world peace through inner peace. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can create this in your community, join me on Sundays. I teach a live masterclass webinar every Sunday, and I invite you to join. It's at 7 p.m. EST, and the details are in the caption. So check it out. I'll see you there. Be ready to take notes and ask questions.